You know, when you think about life insurance, it's easy to think it's all about life and death. But really, it's a business of prediction. It's this massive, high-stakes financial game that all comes down to one big question. How long will a group of people live? We're going to pull back the curtain on how they calculate what's called mortality profit. That's the money they make when they get their prediction right.
So how exactly does an insurance company take a statistical guess, an educated guess, about life and death and turn it into actual profit or loss? Well, to figure that out, we're going to walk through a super simple, really clear example.
Okay, to make this all feel a bit more real, let's build a hypothetical insurance portfolio from scratch. Don't worry, no crazy complex formulas just yet. We're just looking at the basic building blocks to see how the money actually flows, all based on what the company predicts is going to happen. All right, first things first, our customers. Let's imagine a life insurance company, and they've got a portfolio with exactly 10,000 people in it. And to keep it simple, every single person has taken out a basic one-year life insurance policy. Now, for every one of these policies, the payout, what they call the sum assured, is a flat $50,000. That's the cash the company has to pay out to the beneficiaries if someone with a policy passes away during that one-year term. Okay, now we get to probably the most important number in this whole thing, the prediction. The company has crunched all its data, looked at all its charts and actuarial tables, and they've predicted that exactly 1% of these 10,000 people are going to pass away this year. I mean, their entire financial plan for this group is built on that single assumption. So, with that prediction locked in, we can start to figure out what the company actually has on the line. What's the real financial risk tied to every single one of these policies? And that brings us to our very first key term. It's called death strain at risk, or DSAR for short. I know, it sounds a little intense, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It's basically the net amount of cash the company is on the hook for with each claim. Think of it as the payout minus any money they've already got stashed away for that specific policy. So for these super simple one-year policies we're talking about, the math is incredibly straightforward. The payout, right, is $50,000. But because it's only a one-year deal, the company hasn't had time to build up any kind of long-term reserve for these policies, so that reserve is zero, which means the full $50,000 is the sum at risk for every single person. And this is where it starts to get really interesting. See, the entire insurance business pretty much lives or dies on the gap between what a company thinks is going to happen and what actually happens out there in the real world. So let's break down their expectation. You've got 10,000 policies. They predict a 1% mortality rate. The math here is easy, right? They are expecting exactly 100 of their policyholders to pass away this year. This brings us to our next big term, expected death strain, or EDS. If that last one, DSAR, was the risk for just one person, EDS is the total risk for the entire group. It's the total payout the company is basically bracing itself for, all based on their prediction. But, predictions are, well, they're just predictions. So at the end of the year, the company takes a look at the real numbers. And in our example here, even though they expected 100 deaths, only 89 people actually passed away. So fewer people died than they thought would. And that real-world number gives us our final key term for this part, actual death strain, or ADS. This isn't some forecast or a guess. This is the cold, hard number. It's what the company actually had to pay out in claims. Okay, so we have what they expected, and we have what really happened. Now it's time for the moment of truth. Did the company make a profit, or did they take a loss based on their prediction? Let's do the math and find out. First up, let's look at their expected payout. They predicted 100 deaths, right? And each claim was going to cost them $50,000. So their expected death strain was a nice round $5 million. That's the number they had budgeted for.
Okay, now for what they actually paid. In reality, only 89 claims came through the door, each for that same $50,000. So their actual death strain ended up being $4,450,000.
And this brings us right to the core formula, which honestly is beautifully simple. The mortality profit is just what they expected to pay out, minus what they actually paid out. It's just the gap between what you planned for and what really happened.
So you take what they expected, that $5 million, and subtract what they actually paid, that $4.45 million, and you're left with a positive number, $550,000. That is the company's mortality profit. They made over $500,000, not because they were great predictors, but because reality was just better than they predicted. You could say they guessed wrong, but they guessed wrong in the best possible way.
But what if the entire financial model we just talked about was flipped completely on its head? What if a company's biggest risk wasn't people dying, but people living? This is where things get really, really interesting because it turns everything we just learned totally upside down.
Think about a product called an annuity. With an annuity, the insurance company pays you a steady income for as long as you live. So now they're the ones betting on how long you're going to be around to collect all those payments.
Now, check out this quote. This is directly from our source material talking about a portfolio of annuities. It says, "The loss arises because fewer people died than expected." Now, hold on a second. Fewer people died, and that caused a loss? How is that even possible?
And that just perfectly illustrates the flip side of the coin. With an annuity, the company's strain isn't a one-time payout. It's having to keep making payments year after year. Their financial risk is people living too long. So if fewer people die than they predicted, well, that just means more people survived. And more survivors mean more checks to write for way more years than they ever budgeted for. So in this case, lighter mortality, fewer deaths, is actually terrible for business. It creates a massive financial loss.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Well, at the end of the day, for an insurance company, profit and loss isn't some kind of moral judgment on life or death. It's purely a measure of one thing: how good were their predictions? It doesn't matter if it's a life insurance policy or an annuity. The goal is always to get reality to line up as closely as possible with your forecast.
So the next time you see an ad on TV for life insurance or maybe a retirement plan, just remember what's going on behind the scenes. It's not really about peace of mind. It's about a massive, incredibly sophisticated guessing game, and it makes you wonder, what are they really calculating when they look at you?